The first time she caught me staring, I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. She was lying on a faded blue towel in the backyard next door, enjoying one of the first warm afternoons of spring in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, Oregon. I had stepped onto my porch with a cup of coffee after another exhausting shift at the local hospital maintenance department, carrying months of silent grief that no one around me seemed to notice. Then she looked up, smiled without judgment, and raised a hand as if she had known me for years. A moment later, she laughed softly and pointed toward her shoulder, silently asking if I could help reach the sunscreen she couldn't apply to the middle of her back. Strange how a single ordinary moment can change the direction of a lonely life. If you were standing where I stood that afternoon, carrying invisible wounds while someone offered simple trust instead of suspicion, would you have accepted that unexpected invitation, or would fear have convinced you to walk away? My name is Nathan, and for almost 3 years I had lived alone in that small rented house after losing both my father and my younger brother within 18 months. Grief had quietly stolen my confidence. I still went to work every day, paid my bills, mowed my lawn, and smiled politely at neighbors, but inside I felt like someone watching life through a dusty window. The neighborhood knew me as the quiet man who never hosted parties, rarely spoke, and always hurried indoors before sunset. I convinced myself that staying invisible protected me from more heartbreak. The woman next door was named Abigail. She had moved into the old white cottage only a few weeks earlier with nothing more than an aging pickup truck, several cardboard boxes, and a cheerful golden retriever named Cooper. Unlike me, she greeted every neighbor with warmth. She planted flowers that somehow brightened the entire street, waved to children riding bicycles, and somehow remembered everyone's name after meeting them only once. Looking at her from a distance, anyone would have assumed life had always been kind to her. The truth, however, was hidden behind quiet evenings when she sat alone on her porch staring at old photographs long after darkness covered the neighborhood. Helping her with sunscreen lasted less than a minute, yet something unexpected happened afterward. Instead of returning inside awkwardly, we remained outside talking about ordinary things: the unpredictable Oregon weather, noisy squirrels stealing bird seed, and the challenge of keeping tomato plants alive. For the first time in years, I laughed without forcing it. That simple conversation reminded me that healing sometimes begins with nothing more complicated than someone choosing to stay for another few minutes. Over the following weeks, small acts of kindness slowly replaced the silence between our homes. Abigail brought homemade blueberry muffins after discovering I skipped breakfast most mornings. I repaired her broken fence after a windstorm without expecting payment. Cooper eventually stopped waiting at her porch and began greeting me every afternoon as though I had always belonged there. The neighborhood started seeing us talking across the fence, sharing coffee before work, or helping elderly neighbors carry groceries. Without realizing it, the loneliness that had wrapped itself around both of us began losing its grip. One rainy evening everything changed again. I noticed Abigail sitting on her porch steps despite the cold drizzle. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she held a worn leather journal against her chest. She finally shared the truth she had hidden behind her bright smile. 2 years earlier she had survived a devastating car accident that took the life of her fiancé, Matthew. She blamed herself every single day because she had insisted they drive home that night despite the heavy rain. Since then she had moved from city to city trying to escape memories that always seemed to follow her. Listening to her pain, I realized grief speaks the same language no matter whose heart carries it. That night I told her about my father, whose heart had failed unexpectedly, and about my younger brother Jacob, who had lost his battle with addiction despite our family's desperate efforts to save him. For years I had believed talking about them would reopen every wound. Instead, sharing those memories with someone who truly understood made the burden feel lighter than it had in years. We didn't solve each other's pain. We simply stopped carrying it alone. Summer slowly arrived, bringing neighborhood cookouts, children's laughter, and longer evenings filled with orange skies. Abigail encouraged me to volunteer with her every Saturday at a local community food pantry. At first I resisted because I believed I had nothing left to give. Yet watching struggling families receive groceries with grateful tears reminded me that broken people often understand compassion better than anyone else. Every meal we pack seemed to heal something inside us that neither words nor time alone could reach. Life, however, rarely allows healing without another test. Late one August afternoon, a powerful electrical fire broke out in the elderly Wilson family's garage across the street. Smoke spread quickly while Mr. Wilson struggled to help his wife leave the house. Without thinking, Abigail and I rushed across the road together. I managed to guide Mrs. Wilson outside while Abigail called emergency services and comforted the frightened grandchildren. Thankfully everyone survived, but watching that family embrace each other afterward reminded me how precious ordinary days truly are. Possessions could always be replaced. People could not. Months later, our neighborhood looked different. Flowers covered Abigail's yard. Children frequently played fetch with Cooper. I found myself smiling at strangers during morning walks. Even the empty chair on my porch no longer represented loss, it represented possibility. Abigail never replaced the people she had lost, just as I never stopped missing my father and brother. Instead, we learned that loving again does not erase old memories. It honors them by proving that pain never has the final word. Looking back, it still amazes me that everything began with an embarrassing moment beneath a warm spring sun, when I believed I had been caught doing something foolish. Instead of humiliation, I found friendship. Instead of isolation, I found purpose. Instead of another closed door, life quietly opened one I never expected to see. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a small moment of kindness that completely changed the direction of your life? As the seasons continued changing, Abigail and I often sat on neighboring porches watching sunsets paint the Oregon sky, understanding that second chances rarely arrive with grand announcements. More often, they arrive disguised as ordinary afternoons, gentle smiles, shared burdens, and simple acts of trust. Sometimes the people who help heal our deepest wounds first appear as complete strangers living only a few steps away, quietly reminding us that hope has been waiting next door all along. And if this story touched your heart, please consider liking, commenting, sharing it with someone who may need hope today, and subscribing for more stories that remind us kindness can change a life when we least expect it.